Does everybody know what we're doing today? Okay. So let me formally get the program going right here. I guess you hadn't figured out who gets saved at the house yet. She'll figure it out eventually. In case you haven't, in case you don't remember, or maybe you don't care, we're going to start out with the big picture, and then we're going to go down to the small picture. All right, so today we're following, small picture, we're following Willard's New York Brigade. I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm sure I've got ancestors from all four regiments. I wasn't going to do that much on the 39th. I'll set all that up and we'll see what it's raining, but we'll see. I'll at least go point it out to you and so forth. What we were going to do, I was going to focus my attention on the other three regiments, the 125th, the 126th, and the 111th. Now, it is my intention, and probably somebody's already been out there, it is my intention to follow that trail down to the Willard Monument, which is down in the swell down there. Now, a lot of y'all are wearing shorts, so, you know, it is what it is. I mean, it is a pasture. So, but I think a lot of you probably haven't seen that marker. So I want you to see that. It's one of the few places we have where, you know, the event is actually marked. You know, you can count those on two hands for one hand. So anyway, we're going to go big picture and then down to small picture. So let's set up the brigade first. Who are the units? So these folks that we're following today are New Yorkers. And I won't try to do the accent, to say the least. For those of you that are on this end over here, facing me to my stage right or left, Willard's Brigade is going to begin up past the Bryan Farm. Some of you can probably see that white farmhouse up at the top of the ridge. And Willard's Brigade, and today the regimental markers are on the other side of the Bryan House on Cemetery Ridge. That's one of the things that caught Willard's Brigade when they put up the monuments, because the GBMA, Gettysburg Battlefield Memorial Association, and then rolling into the War Department, stipulated, and this didn't happen 100%, but they wanted it to happen this way, that the original markers for the regiments had to go on the original battle line. What they're doing there is trying to put order out of confusion. All right, and they're also keeping Confederate monuments out of the Union lines. I mean, that's also good for that too, you know. So they're keeping the peace among each other and among the former foes. So what I'm telling you is, when I talk about Willard, they're actually starting up here, but fighting down here. Now, Carlton does the whole walk. He'll walk you if you come back for the anniversary, you're going down the whole route. I'm not quite that energetic, especially when it's raining. But anyway, they're starting over here, and the Union is facing back behind you, or facing the way that I'm facing. Okay, so the unit consists, as I said, of four units. The brigade, once again, corps, division, brigade, regiment. Regiment, brigade, division, corps. You can see it on this monument, the Pennsylvania monument, right here, all over the place, most of them being regiments. The four regiments, 39th New York, 269 men. I'll get back to them in a minute. 111th New York, 390 men. 125th New York, 392 men. And the 126th New York, 455 men. This is approximately 1,508 men coming out on the line. This is I would say, by a couple of hundred, an above average size brigade or regiments. You know, I would say, I don't know, probably somebody knows, but I'd say the average size regiment here is about 300. So they're slightly bigger. Most of them are in number wise. And also, the first thing that grabs me is that the high numbers of Willard's Brigade. Whenever I see something in the Civil War, and I'm talking about Union right now, well, you could say Confederate, but Confederate numbers don't go as high. They have less men, and the Confederates put, unlike the Union, put new recruits in old units. The Union creates entire new units. That's why the Irish Brigade, for example, can't reform. They can't reconstitute because they can't get new members. They're forming, other units. So anyway, when I see a number, 111, 125, 126, that automatically tells me that the unit was raised later in the war. Sometimes I impress myself. I did this program in 2010. That's when this thing was originally written. Now, I went back and added a couple more pages because I wanted to do something different for y'all today, or put in some different information. But I was thinking as I did this program, if you go back and look, 2010, for one thing, I had hair when I did this program. Oh, all the bald guys like, oh no, you got a lot of hair to me. And, the situation was completely different. If you go back and see that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Ain't no chocolate milk no more. All right. So the three regiments, 111, 125, 126, specifically enlisted in July of '62, with Lincoln's call for an additional 300,000 volunteers. And they signed up for 3-year enlistments. These three units, 125, 126, 111, all arrived at Harpers Ferry, West Virginia in September of 1862. So keep this in mind. They enlist in July, and by September they're at an active military post. Now, you Gettysburg, you Civil War buffs know where I'm going with this. Mm-hmm. It's September of 1862, and they're in Harpers Ferry.
Oops. And here comes
Tell them I said hello. 3 companies of Hungarians, if you can imagine, and 1 company each of Italians. Can you say that? Italians. Okay. There's your Southern lesson for today. Let's practice it together. Italians. Okay. So they have 1 company of Italians, 1 company of Swiss who brought their own cheese, right there, full of holes, which the Southerners did not understand. French and Spanish Portuguese, which I suppose means Spain. The 39th was known as the Garibaldi Guards, and they actually took 3 battle flags into, well, I don't know if they had them by now, but when they marched off in 1861, they marched off with the U.S. flag, the Empire State flag, and a flag from the Europeans. Some wore the green flag from the war in Europe. Yeah, they brought from this guy. They were organized by, and somebody gonna have to help me, Frederick G. D. Utassi, D hyphen, or what do you call it, colon, UTASSY. Who wants a shot at it?
Utassi.
D. Utassi. In New York, he liked to be called the Count. And from now on, he's known as the Count, not D. Utassi. Apparently, the old boy got a court-martial for incompetency and was removed in 1863. Y'all can go back, or if you're interested, I have the charges. It has nothing to do with Gettysburg, but basically he was exonerated on most charges, and they were like reselling army horses, putting in orders for, this is kind of smart actually if he's guilty of it. He put in, he drew rations for more men than he had. You know, stuff like that was what was occurring out there. And I think there may have been something funky with the payroll that he was accused of. If you've ever been to Harpers Ferry, you know that Harpers Ferry basically sits between three, what happened to the dog? Oh, there he is. It sits between three heights. Can you help me for a minute? And so, yes, sir. I need tall people. Come over here. You're going to be loud. Oh, no, you'll be Bolivar. You're the short one. You go over here. They're the lowest height. You come over here. Just face me. Right here, right here. Who we got tall? Come over here. Face me. Right here. And so, face me. So, I'm Harpers Ferry. And Harpers Ferry is surrounded by three heights. Now, I'm not facing the correct way for everything, but we're not interested in that. Well, you have, on the Harpers Ferry side, meaning connecting with the city, you have Bolivar Heights. Over here, if I'm facing in this direction, you would have the Potomac River running this way, and you would have the Shenandoah River running this way. That's why Harpers Ferry is grounded as an arsenal, because you have water power, people, right? They didn't have nuclear reactors, so you put your power, you need to make something, you put it near water. Okay, so you have three heights, Bolivar, Maryland, and Loudon. Well, the Confederates, when Robert E. Lee comes into Maryland, the Confederates, not to go into great detail in this, Robert E. Lee is surprised that the garrison in Harpers Ferry does not evacuate when he crosses the Potomac. They stay put, and that's a big deal. All right, because Lee then has to turn his army back around. And basically what happens, why I have these three people here, is it's a great operation, you know, and pretty, you know, for what they end up capturing, pretty bloodless from a Confederate standpoint. The Confederates envelop it from three different directions. In other words, they take Loudon Heights, and then they come over here and they get on the other side of Bolivar Heights, and then they're coming up toward Maryland. Well, if Maryland is across the Potomac over here, here's your escape route. Some people argue that Dixon Miles down here in lowly Harpers Ferry, dominated by these heights, should have withdrawn to Maryland Heights. He doesn't do that. Instead, he sends a force up the side of Maryland Heights in order to get to the top. One of those regiments that he sends up there is from the future Willard's brigade. And one of those regiments, the regiment which he sent was not the 39th. The regiment which he sent was one of the green ones. And they're coming up to the top. Now, why Dixon Miles, the garrison commander, did that, I don't know. He had 12,000 men to defend the post. Surely he had somebody that was a little bit better off or more experienced. And these Confederates coming toward them, meaning from the opposite side, you know. Oh, how are you? Did you come by yourself? I need to talk to you about some write-off. Come up here, will you? Stand right here. Mr. Joe. The Confederates coming from behind on Maryland Heights and the Union going to face them, those Confederates are from Lafayette McLaws division. And they include veteran combat units, which for you Gettysburg folks are Kershaw and Barksdale, specifically in the front. I need not tell you Civil War buffs how much experience, how much fighting these South Carolinians and these Mississippians had already had, you know, by the time September of '62. So anyway, on September 11th, two Confederate forces, Kershaw and Barksdale, began to pressure from Maryland Heights. The Union commander atop Maryland Heights requested reinforcements, and the 125th New York, 126th New York, under Colonel Eliakim, I hope I'm saying that right, Sherrill, was dispatched to the top, and it turned out to be a fateful decision. The New Yorkers were so green, ladies and gentlemen. What did I tell you? They've only been there 3 weeks. That Sherrill has them in the moonlight, in the pre-dawn darkness, he has them in the moonlight practicing loading their weapons. That's what we're talking about. And then they're sent to the front. So, Who is this Sherrill that's going up the side of Maryland Heights? Sherrill's a congressman, elected in 1847. He becomes a state senator, elected in 1854. He is the chairman of the banking committee, so he must have been able to do numbers right there. In 1860, he purchased a large farm and moved to Geneva, wherever that is. And it's not Switzerland.
Right on top of Lake Seneca Lake.
Is it? How big is it today?
It's a fairly decent sized city. It's a smaller city.
Is it? Is there any small cities in New York?
Oh yeah, a whole bunch.
Okay.
Once you get out of New York City, it's all small cities.
Oh, is it? I
Pretty
found
much.
that way about Illinois too. I drove from Chicago to St. Louis. It looked normal. I said, I could live here, fly around here, nothing. I said, yeah, sounds like my kind of town. It's the Bluff on September 12th and spent a pensive evening. The next morning, Kershaw's South Carolinians began to pressure the line. After firing 4 or 5 rounds, the New Yorkers fell back almost to the edge of the bluff. I mean, they're trying, they're shooting, but you can imagine, people. There's no preparing you for combat. Some of you, I probably got some combat veterans in this crowd right here. There's no preparing you for that. All you're hoping is that muscle memory will take over and the soldier will fight. That's why you train so hard. Now, as they fell back, there was a lull in the fighting. Colonel Sherrill got them back in the line with a lot of exhortations, and the line held. During this short lull, the New Yorkers adjusted their cartridge boxes and talked things over. 45 minutes later, the South Carolinian men, Kershaw's men, came on again, this time with Barksdale's men. The New Yorkers said that, for you combat buffs out there, the New Yorkers said that the second time the South Carolinians attacked, they didn't have any skirmishers out front. What does that mean? They know where the enemy is. And they just came in. The New Yorkers testified that the South Carolinians waded into them and just started delivering volleys. Only disciplined troops can stand there and reload. You can imagine what it's doing to these New Yorkers. Because the South Carolinians are taking casualties, obviously, but they're absorbing them, and they keep firing, and they're probably firing at a better rate, and they're probably firing at greater accuracy. So the New Yorkers are getting mauled up here. So they start to fall back, especially after the Kershaw starts to work around the flank. And I don't know many men from any war that'll take a flanking. Sherrill attempted to rally his men, strolling the line, urging on all with his might while recklessly exposing himself. Well, the inevitable happened, and a Confederate bullet slammed into the side of Sherrill's face. Quote, tearing through both cheeks, knocking out several teeth, and wounding his tongue as to render him speechless. With that incident, it was only a short time, because they had to take him off the field. He's spitting teeth out. Before the New Yorkers broke. That had to hurt. The Union forces on Maryland Heights eventually had to give way and retreat to Harpers Ferry. Well, once you lose Maryland Heights, thank you for your patience. And I enjoyed getting your picture in the mail, too. Once the Confederates have gained, now the Union faced this way, the Union still holds Bolivar Heights. Let me get you to step forward toward her. But the Confederates have enveloped here. The Confederates, you step forward, have enveloped here. And now the Confederates hold Maryland Heights. Well, here's the Union. They're down here. So I don't know if my makeshift map is making any sense here. But what happens when you crown these two heights with artillery? You have no defense if you're a Union soldier. I mean, you can get hit from behind. The enemy is not only, attacking. A.P. Hill is coming from this way. If you're fighting over here on Bolivar Heights, you can get hit from behind. From Maryland, it's untenable is the word I'm looking for. And after only a few rounds, this is why I'm working toward it. It has a big part of the story. I wouldn't spend so much time on this. 12,000 Union soldiers surrender to Confederate forces at Harpers Ferry. It is the largest surrender of United States forces until Corregidor in World War II. That's in the Philippines. 12,000 men wiped off the map. Yeah. And A.P. Hill, to tie it all in for you Civil War buffs, A.P. Hill, has nothing to do with us, does the surrender. He's the one that's left behind to take the arms and sign the paroles and everything. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why A.P. Hill is last to the Battle of Antietam, because he's marching from Harpers Ferry. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. The Union forces are marched out. As for Sherrill, he returned to the regiment around January of 1863. I put this quote in. Dan Welch gave me this quote before it came out, some of the new material. But this is so cool that I didn't want to pass it up. So Sherrill comes back in January of 63. Quote, after receiving the wound, Sherrill first went to a military hospital near Washington and then on to Albany, where he would, thank you, by the way, thanks for the heights. I won't hold you anymore, but you can stand there, I don't care. Because the wound was not healing properly, Sherrill first went to a military hospital near Washington and then on to Albany, where he consulted another physician. Remember, he got hit in the mouth. Because the wound was not healing properly and the doctor could not determine what the problem was, he was unable to return to duty. Harpers Ferry, the brigade is paroled. When I say that, I don't mean criminal parole. Parole in the Civil War is where you sign a document and you pledge an oath that you will not fight again until you're properly exchanged. You're paroled. You give your word of honor. They would never do that today. All right? But yeah, the men were horrified to learn as they were going to Chicago that the 126th New York, the people that had been those green soldiers that had been on Maryland Heights, were being castigated in the newspapers and military reports as the cause of defeat on Maryland Heights. The military commission, which was eventually called together, drew attention, quote unquote, to the disgraceful behavior of the regiment. Of course, the report did not mention the greenness of the regiment, the inadequacies of the forces on Maryland Heights, and just et cetera, the obstacles they were up against. It did not matter. While the brigade waited for exchange, one new recruit marching past the camp derisively called the New Yorkers, quote, the Harpers Ferry Cowards. And this is a big point, and the name stuck. It's a stigma, and the men became discouraged. Now let me reiterate this. The only unit, there were 4 regiments in Willard's brigade at Gettysburg. The only unit that was on that heights was the 126th. But the other 3 units, the 39th, the 111th, and the 125th, are all rolled up into the stigma. The brigade, not the regiment, is known as the Harpers Ferry Cowards. This is September of 1862, or the fall of 1862, all right? Think about, the older I get, you know, time seems to go faster. The older I get. I don't know why that is, but everybody nodding their head. Oh yeah, man. I used to be 18, man. I smoked 3 packs a day. September of 62 to July of 63 is not that long a period.
No.
It's not. And think about how many battles, I'm going to try to stay on track here. Think about how many battles there were in Virginia between now and Gettysburg, between Antietam and Gettysburg. All right? I mean, these men from New York, through all those battles, never have a chance to redeem their reputation. They never have a chance until June of 1863, when they are finally exchanged a couple months before that, and they rejoin the Army of the Potomac. It is not until the Gettysburg campaign that they get that opportunity. So, They're exchanged on November 19th of 1862. The men were sent to the defenses of Washington. On January 6th of 1863, the brigade got a new commander. The brigade commander was a guy by the name of Alexander Hayes. Who's got a statue up there, in case you forget about it. Big bushy beard. This was a good man for the job. Hayes was a strict disciplinarian, but he was fair. What do soldiers always want? They want competency and they want fairness. They want it across the board. They don't like favoritism, right? And they want their leaders leading from the front. Well, you got all three of those with Alexander Hayes. He trained this brigade to fight. He weeded out the incompetent officers and he promoted the good ones. Hence the 39th, right? Consolidates the companies down. If you can't handle it, we'll just consolidate you, right? So by the spring of 1863, Hayes would write, "The Harpers Ferry boys have turned out trumps." That's good, okay? And when we do get a chance, look out for blood. The chance came on June 24th when the brigade was ordered to march north with Meade's army. When the brigade caught up with the 2nd Corps, Hayes' seniority got him promoted to command of the 3rd Division. Is it making sense now? All right, so this is where we get into us. In turn, what happens, people, out of 4 regiments, when the brigade commander gets bumped up, Corps, Division, Brigade, Regiment. When the brigade commander goes up to division commander, the senior regimental commander gets bumped up to brigade. See how that does? Senior in commission. And that is going to bring about George Willard, hence the word Willard's Brigade. He assumes command of the brigade a week before this battle. Where I'm talking about, where that white tin is on the other side of that, this is the terrain I'm talking about. I just wasn't going to write you down. Willard has not moved yet. Around 10 o'clock in the morning of July 2nd, the stillness was broken by Confederate and Union skirmishers fighting out in front. That would be at the Bryan farm. The 39th New York, being the most experienced unit, was dispatched to the Bliss Farm area and eventually joined by the 126th New York. What did Hayes do there? He dispatched the 2 regiments that had experience now. See what he did? The heavy skirmishing on the morning of July 2nd cost the 39th New York 28 casualties at the Bliss Farm. And this, for these other green rookies, is the first time they're seeing comrades being pulled back with, well, they're carrying extra muskets. They're seeing men that were 5 minutes ago healthy and they're coming back with holes in them. And they're seeing, of course, hearing about for the first time dead men. A lot of these New Yorkers, all right? And that's probably not consoling. Now, this quote was given about the skirmish by a private. And I really don't, I'm not spending a lot of time on the Bliss Farm, but the quote was so good. One of these quotes that you get every once in a while from a private where they tell you how it was. You know, one of them, you know, sometimes they'll slip off the 19th century flowery language and tell you. This soldier commented, quote, "But in a soldier's life, you are supposed to go where you are sent and no back talk. At the same time, as long as there was a spark of vitality about us, we were always looking out for number 1. Who writes that? You would stand transfixed with horror sometimes if you should give away to your sensibilities. But a soldier is supposed to pass death by as a natural consequence, paying no attention to anything, only your duty as a soldier. Gaping wounds or headless trunks are often scenes you will come in contact with. You may step in pools of blood over the quarters of your shoes. Think about that for a minute. Such are the results of war. Now, they're getting a taste full of it. Gentlemen, it's going to be, I'm getting in the weeds with you, but this is a battle walk, so I'm going to try to do big picture down to small picture. You got Union troops lining all the way through here on July 2nd. You can look to your right. You people up top can look to your right, facing me, and you can see the monuments going up Cemetery Ridge. You can face to your left, and you can go down through here, and you don't see that many monuments. You mostly see artillery markers. More about that in a minute. On July 2nd, this was the site of Caldwell's division of Union General Winfield Scott Hancock's 2nd Corps. Caldwell's division is in this area. I don't know if they were ever deployed or not. To their left, to your left, the Union left, is going to be Dan Sickles' 3rd Corps. I've said this 1,000 times, but out of 7 Union Corps commanders, Dan Sickles is your only non-West Point graduate. Now, here's your preservation message. My boss says I always need to be more concise, stick to a theme, and give a preservation message. So here's the preservation message. The first 2 I don't know about. Your ancestors did not drive diesel trucks. Your ancestors, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not talking about your Civil War ancestors. I'm talking about your daddy. I'm talking about your mama. I'm talking about your grandparents. They bought you this with their tax money. They paid it forward for you to have the ability to stand here on this day, rainless day, and look up at that high ground right out in front. That ridge that slopes upward. And I saw a presentation one time where, I hate to misquote, but like 20-something different land transactions had to take place in order to get back the original 400 acres of the Rose Farm. Ladies and gentlemen, there used to be a Stuckey's at the Peach Orchard. Eisenhower used to shop there. You know, with little thimbles, you know, Grandma used to keep, you know what I'm talking about? You put in the little things. Anyway, they paid for all that. They wiped off the modern intrusions and gave this back to you. On July 2nd, because of this, on July 2nd of 1863, you get to make the same decision. Dan Sickles is sitting down here where you see that lift off in the distance. And he is a worried man. He has not deployed his corps. He views that the ground in front of him is a better position to occupy than the one he has ordered. He is ordered to connect his right flank. Remember, I'm reversed. He is ordered to connect his right flank with the 2nd Corps and his left flank over here at Little Round Top. Well, and one of the boldest moves of the war, Dan Sickles, as you all know, is going to take his men from this position and he is going to move them out to that high ground along the highway. Now, that's the purpose of this program is not to debate Dan Sickles again. I'm sure there's some tape. I'm sure Stuffy's got some tape on it somewhere, right? The purpose, though, is because of Sickles' move, this is why Willard gets involved. That's the big picture. There's no Union troops where we're about to walk. As we're walking in the footsteps of Willard's brigade. So how does Willard get here? All right, the first thing that happens after Sickles moves out there is that the Confederates come into position. But as you all know, most of you know, the Confederates don't come into position until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or they don't step off until 4 in the afternoon. When Longstreet and his Confederate command step off, they hit the Union line over there at the base of Little Round Top, Devil's Den, Wheatfield, Peach Orchard. They hit Sickles so hard. And by this time, George Meade has found out what has happened, and he is forced to support Sickles. So Caldwell's division, the men that were originally here, are some of the first units that are dispatched down to the Wheatfield, all because of Sickles' move. Well, Caldwell leaves, and that's a huge gap. Well, they need more men, so they go galloping up. The other two divisions of the Second Corps are under Gibbons and under Hayes. Both Hancock sends a messenger off and says, I need reinforcements. Who can you dispatch? Of course, one brigade will be dispatched from Gibbon, and then another one is needed from Hayes. Who is in reserve in Hayes' brigade? Willard. So, we'll get moving here. If you look behind you and up Cemetery Ridge, Willard's brigade, if you look at that tour road, I can't see it, but I know it's there. Willard's brigade would be to the right of the tour road as you look north. They wouldn't march down the tour road. Why wouldn't you march a brigade down the present day tour road?
Wasn't there.
That's right, because you could see them. And what would the Confederates do if they could see them? They'd shell them. They'd shoot them. Yeah, it's not a trick question. So you would be in defilade. I would be so torqued if I was a soldier and my commander marched me on the crest. Man, I would just really tick me off. Not that I would say anything about it or anything. Yeah, so they're marching down this road. Reportedly, Alexander Hayes, the division commander, went up to Willard, George L. Willard, and he says, I want you to march, and he pointed in this direction, and I want you to go down there and knock the hell out of the Rebs. Seems pretty plain to me. But, point of order, and we'll move off. Willard's brigade is headed, I don't know specifically, but they're headed to the vicinity of the Wheatfield. That's where they're headed as they're marching down through here. They're going to give help to the other Union soldiers. So as we get on the tour road, ladies and gentlemen, y'all please keep your head on the swivel. We're going to march down to where you see those cars off in the distance, and we won't spend much time, but we're going to come marching all the way back here to where we are today, and then we're going to snake our way out until this underbrush. Willard's brigade is going to run into some trouble as they're marching down this tour road and be ordered into position. What I'm asking you to do before we step off is when you get down on the level with me, when you get down on ground level, you can't see as well as you can up there, especially when I take you out in this field. So what I'm asking you to do is look at the landscape. Most of the fighting is going to be done in that swell in front of you. And the reason I've got you positioned like that is to give you some sort of bird's eye view as to what it actually looked like, as you know, from above. I didn't mention was that Hancock himself personally rode with the men partly way. I can't tell you where he got on and where he got off, but he was with Willard's brigade part of the way down here. Now what I don't know, I know because I'm preempt this question, is I don't know the exact moment that Hancock is ordered to take command of Sickles' Corps. I'm getting a little ahead of the story, but I can't name the exact moment. I don't know anybody that can. So was it after it disintegrated? I always put Sickles getting wounded late in the action, because I always thought, and this is just hypothetical, but it's plausible, that Sickles is hit from a Confederate gun near the peach orchard along the Emmitsburg Road. So that would mean that that position had to be cleared out by that point. So we're talking, point being, we're probably talking around, I can't present the exact moment, but somewhere around 6 o'clock. A couple hours of fighting has occurred. It's really loud down here, and Willard's brigade has been dispatched. They weren't dispatched immediately, but it's coming fast, you know. So around 6 o'clock, I would say 6:30, Barksdale's going to crack the peach orchard. That would put, I don't know how long it took Willard to march down here, but let's say it took him 15 minutes to get here, 20 minutes, maybe 30 getting everybody up. You're probably now looking at 6:30, 7 o'clock by the time these New Yorkers are getting to this spot. All right, so the Confederates, it's very hard for Willard's men to get an eye on the situation. Now this rain kind of helps me a little bit, But the swell, the trees which you see right here, ladies and gentlemen, they would have been lower. They would have been scrub trees. Why is it growing up today? Because we can't. It's a swell, and we can't get a bush hog in there. So it's too many rocks and boulders in there. And anybody run a tractor knows you can't put a bush hog down in there, you know. So, but apparently the park just bought a machine that's going to do it. So,
Oh, wow.
not a bush hog, but one of them, I forget what they call it. It's a mean machine though. It's got arms on it. You know, it just whacks things as it comes through. Apparently it was developed by a member of the mafia. Okay. Apparently it'll take out anything. Even Mount St. Joseph. All right. So, put the trees smaller. Oh, I see somebody already put some flags out there. You know, there's some person goes around here and puts these little plastic laminated signs out next to some of the statues. Have you ever seen them? Put in the description, a love note on it. You seen them, sir? Yeah, I wonder if that's that same person that puts it on there. I'd like to know who that was. Anyway, a brief halt ensued. The time must have felt like an eternity. I want you to put smoke in here, people. It's cloudy. I want you to put white smoke in there, so thick that you can't see among that swell, or it's very difficult. I mean, it would look like somebody had set off a fog machine out there. Now, out of that smoke is going to be coming what? As the New Yorkers are standing right here. Out of that smoke, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be coming hundreds of Third Corps soldiers back toward this position. Willard deployed his brigade with the 125th New York on the left and the 126th on the right. He held back his other two regiments in reserve, the 39th New York on the left and the 111th New York on the right. Both regiments about 200 yards behind the line. The 200 yards is no joke. All right, so if he deployed, I don't know the exact spot, but if the 125th and the 126th deployed here, what happened to me, people? Come on. Just stand here, you know, it's the easiest job in the world. Stand beside her, right there, and then I need two more people to stand behind them. Come on. All right. Coming too? All right. There you go. So here's Willard's brigade right here. Right here, raise your hand. This is the 125th. The 126th. Right here, 125th, 126th, 111th, 39th. Right here. Notice how they have two regiments in front, two regiments behind. That's the way that Willard deploys them. This second line is 200 yards behind the first line. So I don't know the exact spot, but 200 yards will put the two regiments somewhere over in here. I would say that's an easy guess. Fusion. Hundreds of people coming out. One of those regiments, barely the other one, has fired a shot in the war. I mean, 125th, I mean, they got balls zipping around them all of a sudden. And people are starting to get hit. So anyway, the left of the brigade was behind a row of artillery set up by Freeman McGilvery. Hancock ordered Willard to forward his brigade, quote, to the fringe of the undergrowth in the swell to their front. Fringe of the undergrowth is in quotation marks. So what do you call fringe of the undergrowth? It's where you see those trees. That's where he's ordered to take them. Put the trees smaller. And they would have had animals out there. Now, why is Willard deploying behind artillery, ladies and gentlemen? Why is this artillery here? Because there was no infantry. For the people with the Lano map, you can see them start throwing the batteries. Now look to your right. See all the artillery pieces? All these artillery pieces doesn't necessarily mean they're here on July 2nd. Some of them are from July 3rd. But nevertheless, the batteries are being thrown in position. Big picture, ladies and gentlemen. There are no Union troops beside Willard right here. So if Willard is marching this way, and they're marching in column, Hancock halts them, and they face about to the right. If the truth was known, y'all face to your left. If the truth was known, they may have been marching like this by the left flank. That would make sense because your column wouldn't be as long. And if you're trying to expedite something, you double the column up, right? That's just a guess on my part. But if they're marching south, Hancock orders them to halt and then face to the right. When they face to the right, they go from column and they go into battle line. And the 125th and 126th are going to start pushing forward out into this field. And you can just imagine the tension. So between these three regiments, these two and this one, you have 900 men, about 1,200 men in the brigade coming forward. Now opposing them as they come out in the field, if you look not at this closest barn, but that red barn up on the hill, that's the Sherfy farm. Now the gentleman that was asking me a while ago, now you can see the peach orchard. If you look at the red barn and you look to the left of that, doesn't stand out well in the haze. But there's some bushes. If you keep going following the hill, there's kind of I don't know what that is. I guess that's the artilleryman monument that I'm seeing, that dark thing. Those bushes behind him is the peach orchard. That is where the first significant Confederate breakthrough happens. And that's going to be Barksdale's Mississippi. Now, how many men they have after they break through the line? You know, Barksdale breaks through this line, and if he gets out from the peach orchard, he's over here. He breaks through the peach orchard, and then he wheels to the left and dresses to the right. And so these Union soldiers out here, when Barksdale breaks through, here's the highway. Barksdale breaks through, and he wheels to the left. Now what am I doing to the Union soldiers where you see those monuments up there?
Rolling them up.
Rolling them up. I'm raking them up. And that, ladies and gentlemen, coupled with Barksdale hitting them here, and then Anderson's division of A.P. Hill hit them from the front. That's going to be Wilcox. Lane, etc. The Confederate attack is rolling this way. Marches down the road, and basically between this red barn and that red barn, he takes he instead of heading this way, he turns this way. And he's headed right toward us. That's why Willard happens to be at the right place at the right time. I'm going to break for questioning because this is the big picture, and you're not going to get the small picture unless you get the big picture. There are no Union infantry on this ridge, on this portion of the ridge, except for Willard's brigade and past the PA Memorial, small regiment of Minnesotans. If the Confederates get here, look to your left. There's Little Round Top. Look to your right. There's Cemetery Ridge. If the Confederates get here, the Taneytown Road is right behind you. You cut the fish hook in half. You break the fish hook line, and you cut the Taneytown Road. Hancock orders Willard forward. So what you have, I don't know how many men they have. We'll say around 900 men left from Barksdale's brigade, minus losses. But you see, and they would have been filtering in, hundreds of Mississippians starting to filter into that swell right there. But they're discombobulated. A lot of them are out of ammunition. A lot of them are without officers. A lot of units have been intermingled. It's a lot of confusion. Mississippians are disorganized. Willard's men may be green, but they have unit cohesion. So they start down through this area, and they start pushing toward the Confederates. I picture it as the mass of Confederates will be between the barn and that dead tree that you see up above, just as a marker, somewhere in that area. All right, so what does that mean? Willard's brigade is going to do what? They're going to pretty much lean to the left. when they're firing, the majority of those two regiments are shooting to their left. That's going to make sense better when we get out front. What else we got?
Where is Humphrey's guys coming off the Emmitsburg road rolling? Where are they retreating back to? They
don't know. They don't have any idea where they're going. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and you know, A.A. Humphrey, not to get off into this, but man, he sure seems to fight his division poorly. And nobody ever seems to take him to task. I mean, he doesn't even get the troops up on the military crest. I've often wondered how he got away with that. But they liked him, and his middle name's a fine name. Fine name, right? No relation. But remember, too, the Union line is dissolving from your left to the right. Don't move. But it's basically, as I've said a dozen times, it's a right hook and a left jab on Humphrey's division. And so they're just getting knocked loose. Now, do some units, I don't want to give you the wrong impression, some of those Union units conduct a fighting withdrawal.
Yeah, Humphrey, he's that. I mean,
Well, he's fighting it, but I mean, you know, you're pouring water on a sugar cube at this point, because they're just getting mauled. I mean, you can drive up there and see there's nowhere for them to hunt, to rally. Time for the Union Army. This is about, some people would argue, this is the closest the Confederates come to winning. I mean, they're however many hundreds of yards from that tree line. Let me get my paper. All right. Okay. From the Peach Orchard. Confederate artillery began to pound the area. Now that means the Confederates have taken possession. The New Yorkers dressed their lines, including the fixing of bayonets. Quote, "The venom of the old taunt, Harpers Ferry Cowards, which had so long burned in the veins of this noble regiment, now excited them to fury." Remember that, because I'm going to come back to it. It excited them to fury. All right, and now the end of quote. And now these New Yorkers had a chance to avenge Harper's Ferry finally, unbeknownst to them, against a unit that was actually part of their capture, Barksdale's Mississippians. Have you ever put that together? Right there. Yeah, I never put that together. And I've mentioned this, but here's a quote. The New Yorkers, and it kind of gives you a timetable. The New Yorkers' advance was impeded by hundreds of 3rd Corps men fleeing through their lines. In fact, the number of Sickles soldiers almost disrupted Willard's line. Hancock himself even added, quote, "shouted orders or blistering curses to no avail." Hancock, I don't know if I said this, Hancock was relieved of command of the 2nd Corps and sent to command the 3rd Corps, which a lot of military observers have noted. Hancock was ordered to give up a perfectly good corps and go take command of one that was in shambles. But that's why Hancock is down here cussing, right? Because this is his new command. Now, here's the interesting part. The 111th New York opened their ranks to let 4 stretcher bearers carry General Sickles, minus a leg, to the rear. And they said minus a leg. So I wonder, you know, and I thought that was interesting, not that it wasn't still hanging there, but I wonder if that leg was removed while he was on the field. You know, it was dangling by tendons, but I don't know. That's an interesting note. Maybe it was still attached or still not. I don't know. Be a question for Jim Hessler. Okay. Yeah. Oh, he'd know. What do you got on that hat?
Jim Hessler.
Jim Hessler. Yeah. Yeah, these are
Jim Hessler got his own hat.
Yes, he does.
fall behind Matt.
Where are the Matt Atkinson hats?
Okay, I know it. Well, you couldn't wear those family after. Walk y'all further, but this is fine enough right here.
Absolution.
Absolutely. Yes. This is actually, ladies and gentlemen, this is not absolution. This is fair catch Corbett. Is what it is. Back when they used to have fair catches right here. Now they tell me at Notre Dame they got touchdown Jesus.
They do.
Have a fair catch, Corby.
And my understanding is that the same monument.
Yeah, they have fair catch Corby too. Yeah.
Is it the same monument?
Yes.
Okay. That was my understanding.
In front of the cathedral.
Oh, it's in front of the
Or one of the
cathedral.
big churches.
My understanding too, John Heiser told me this, although we don't know the exact rock. The actual absolution happened behind the Pennsylvania Memorial, probably somewhere where the maintenance yard is. I'd have to look up and see how he found out here or whatever. But yeah, he's been fooling people for a long time. Right here. Anyway, we're on the left flank of Willard's brigade. I can't mark the exact spot. Remember, I'm not going to line these people up again. There were 2 regiments in front and 2 regiments behind. Birney's command. How or why he's over here? I guess Birney's command is drifting this way too, you know, if you could imagine that. He rides up and he finds a battery commander. I believe the gentleman's name was Peebles. You might correct me on that. But Lieutenant Peebles, I believe, was in charge of Watson's battery, which is where you see that stone out there in the middle of the field. Now, not to get too far off the mark here, but when Barksdale breaks through, I told you he wheeled to the left and dressed to the right. His extreme right regiment, the 21st Mississippi, peels off and goes chasing this Union artillery, the 9th Massachusetts specifically. Those are the guns, or excuse me, the horses that you see dead in the Trossel farmhouse. Those are from the 9th Massachusetts Regiment. Those were shot by Mississippians, or the majority of them were shot by Mississippians. Right where that barn is right there. Well, the 21st Mississippi, which is broken away from Barksdale, it keeps advancing, and Watson's brigade, battery is down there where that stone is out in the distance. We now think, most people think, which, you know, is once again, welcome to Gettysburg, that Watson's battery was a little bit to the left, or that stone might be on the right half of the battery, but it's definitely not in the center. Just over to where you see that tree line, which I don't think would have been as thick as it is, and it boils down to this point as to who is correct about what. Humphrey says, and once again, please try to keep up with me. I think the 39th comes at the end of this action. But I'm not going to walk you down here twice. So we're going to cover here and then walk back and do the rest of the action. I think the 125th and the 126th are already advancing to the swell if they're not already in it. When the 39th, the last reserve unit, is sent out here to take that battery. Why do I make that assumption? Because Colonel Humphreys, D.C. Humphreys of the 21st Mississippi, writes about the withdrawal anyway because the rest of the brigade was being pushed back. So in other words, he's out here, the Mississippians, the 21st Mississippi, he felt he was out here on an island. And he couldn't hold the battery by himself. 26 are coming down through here. These 2 regiments, as I said, the Mississippians are over here. I think they're more concentrated to the left, or where you see the depression. I think the way that they came in and as disorganized as they had to be, because they went through like 2 or 3 Union lines, maybe 4, you know, depending on the fighting withdrawal. I think they were in rough shape, really rough shape. Hang with me, all right? So I put them a little bit more than a mob mingling down here, several hundred men. So I put the 125th and the 126th headed sort of this way. Now, that's a problem, because coming over here, not this first bushy tree, but that other one you see off in the distance, we're going to walk down there in a little while. That big oak, I guess is what it is, sticking up out in the distance over there. All right? Coming from that direction and that brown grass behind it is a whole brigade of Alabamians. Well, if you got 2 regiments in front, which, I don't know, what, 600-700 men, you can, and double ranks, you can imagine the front. But if you got Alabamians coming from this way, then you got a problem. Because what's going to happen, the further you advance in that field, what's going to happen? They're going to flank you, right? So I picture the Alabamians coming this way. Going back to the lineup, there's 2 regiments on front, 2 behind. 39th is left in reserve. The 111th that's in reserve in the rear line as the 2 front regiments move across. They are ordered to move by the right flank. In other words, come on up here. Where you been anyway? You're supposed to call the let's get your number. Oh, where am I lying? 39th New York, 111th New York, right here. Okay. As they're moving forward, I won't have them walk out in the grass. The 111th New York starts to move by the right flank this way. I don't know where, but somewhere in this vicinity, and they face to the left. Now, when they face to the left, their left flank apparently doesn't clear the right flank of the 126th out here. So they're actually marching kind of in tandem behind them. Now, eventually, and they're 50 yards. So I told you at the beginning, I'm trying to get you all this detail to show you how quick this is moving out here. They closed the distance from 200 yards to 50 yards, and they're marching behind them, but apparently the left flank couldn't shoot from here until eventually they get to the swell out there, and the 111th is able to clear, and they have a 3-regiment front. The reason I say that they cleared the front is, and to reiterate this again, is I think those 2 front regiments, original 2 front regiments, are leaning to the left, right? And so the 111th is brought up by Willard because he doesn't want those Alabamians coming up here and shooting down the line. So they're extending the lines. That makes sense to everybody? Mm-hmm. But as he moves sort of this way, he uncovers my left flank. And so it sort of just works out, so they come in the line. Now, was it as pretty as I just made it? No, probably not. There's a lot of confusion, especially with green troops. They probably fumbling all over themselves out here in this field. If you could imagine such a thing, dashes out in front of the line and is ordering a halt, and that's when the captains, you have to remember that it's loud. The captains would have to come out front of the companies and tell the company to cease firing. It probably took a minute or 2 to get everybody to quit. And then I'm not saying it's deadly silent, but compared to what it was, there's a lull on the field. You know that movie, that moment in the movie, you know, where the fog is out there and you can't see anything, and then you know what's coming, but you don't know when it's coming? I don't know who called out cease fire. Was it Confederates? Was it survivors of the 3rd Corps? I don't know. I don't know who did it. But nevertheless, as the New Yorkers are ramming new rounds home, you can hear the clang of those ramrods inside the barrel, you know, as they're reloading. All of a sudden, out of that fog comes a volley from those Mississippians, and scores of New Yorkers go down, basically along the edge of that swell. Now, the soldiers don't need to know now that there's no friendlies in their front. If there are any friendlies in their front still, well, that's too bad. Because they're opening up. And they're opening up big time. And so the New Yorkers start delivering volleys into that underbrush and those scrub trees right there, and they start advancing. One more pass at this. The lull in the fighting allowed, I don't know how many minute or 2 went by, the lull in the fighting allowed the Confederates, the Mississippians, to regroup. Were they in a solid battle line? No, they weren't in a solid battle line. But they were able to reload, and they were able to shake out some type of line. So anyway, when Willard starts again toward that, down in that depression, the resistance is harder from the Confederates. But nevertheless, they're driving them through sheer force of numbers back through there. And the whole time, ladies and gentlemen, those Union soldiers are chanting, "Remember Harper's Ferry, remember Harper's Ferry." And I think they're advancing with zeal, if you can. Several hundred yards out there. Color Sergeant Erasmus Bassett. Who names their kid Erasmus? Where's that from anyway? What's Erasmus from? What's that?
Rotterdam.
I know decision.
What is it from?
Erasmus from Rotterdam.
Rotterdam.
Renaissance. Enlightenment.
Renaissance. Erasmus, that was that dude, he in the Old Testament or
He was
something?
a friend of Luther's
Oh, was he?
early on.
Yeah.
Okay.
They had a falling out.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, was he trying to kill Luther
I
too?
think Luther tried to kill him. I think.
Oh, okay. Luther was trying to kill him. So Luther, he must have really hated Luther. Okay. All right. Lucky for that prince.
Yeah.
They'd have gone medieval on him. No, thank you. The dog did too, ma'am. All right. Lieutenant R.A. Color Sergeant Erasmus Bassett led the advance, waving the national colors over his head. A bullet soon struck him in his leg, but he went on. The next round hit him square in the heart, right here. And he, quote, he died without a groan. That had to happen right in front of you. Lieutenant R.A. Bassett of the 126th, also New York, recalled, when we started the charge, I occasionally glanced my eye toward the colors. And I noticed, remember, the color company will be different from whatever company he was commanding. When we started the charge, I occasionally glanced my eye toward the colors and noticed that they were kept about a rod in front of the line of battle. But while we were crossing the ravine, I noticed they faltered and finally fell. I knew then that my dear brother had fallen. You can see that flag going on. Yeah. Now he didn't know what happened to him. Lieutenant Bassett goes on to say that his best friend from childhood was also wounded in this attack, and that his friend from childhood was calling out to him to help him. And Bassett turned to him and says, you know I can't help you. I have to go on because they were under strict orders. You know, that's the human side of this stuff that we don't see. I mean, they're not robots. He had to turn his back on his friend, and he had to command a company not knowing what had happened to his brother. All he knew is the flag had gone down. Now, getting ahead of the story, later on in the evening back at the Bryan Forum, Lieutenant Bassett had the sad facts confirmed to him by his comrades that evening, that his brother had fallen. That's where I say, or Eric said, that the 1st Minnesota came from. Notice how the depression in the ground, you got to get out on the field, ladies and gentlemen, in order to understand what's happening. Now look at this swell. Now look at the depression and how it feeds into here. I think if I was a commander and I wanted to get my men in shelter as best I could, I'd be in there. I wouldn't be up here. I'd be down there. You want to get them as low as possible, at least in my mind. So anyway, 1st Minnesota is coming this way. Now look at the Willard's Brigade's advance. Look at where the lift is out in the distance. Look at where the New York Auxiliary Monument is, which we stopped at out there. There's where Willard is going to be advancing across the field. If you were standing on this rock, which I would suggest you not do, in 1863, you would have had perfect. You would have had the 1st Minnesota coming right towards you, and you would have had those New Yorkers coming across your front. This will be where I set my lawn chair up, right here, right? And so they're going into the swell. Now the reason I put Willard further down and I put the 1st Minnesota further up is the stone that we're about to see, which is going to mark the site of Willard in just a second. Now, the other reason I pulled you over here is because you can't see through that underbrush. Where you see the horses up ahead, I'm not saying they made it that far, but Willard's Brigade is going to keep advancing. Remember, in combat, you always want to keep going. Veteran troops always keep it going. You never stop. What does the military preach today? You do not halt. During an assault, you keep going. No matter what happens, you will push forward. All right. Well, you can't see, but the over there. So Willard's man pushes through this swell, which would not have been as thickly underbrushed, and they start climbing out the other end of the line, pursuing the Confederates. There's no telling how many they shot in the back. But now Barksdale's men are retreating in full mode. Now, as they cross the swell and they start to get on that rise, apparently there was a battery, an abandoned battery of Union artillery. There was an abandoned battery, at least a caisson or a tube or something out there in the middle of the field. And about everybody in Willard's brigade claimed to have recaptured those guns. Right. An attack, let me read an account of the attack across this area, and then we'll get to this monument. This is from a soldier from the 111th New York, which had to be in this general vicinity. He said afterwards, we officers were kept busy closing the ranks as they were depleted and pushing on. Think about that. Not heeding the storm of metal. Our brigade was a large one, and despite its losses presented a long line of bright bayonets. As we neared the rebel lines, their fire slackened and they began to give back. I have never seen soldiers who would stand and receive a bayonet charge. Their wavering inspirited our men, and we had just got in reach of a Massachusetts battery of the 3rd Corps, that might be Turnbull, which they had left and which the enemy had turned and were using on our lines. When we discovered that we were losing our men rapidly, somebody asked me about this earlier, from the fire of the Union guns in our rear. So we were ordered to retreat. Now this he's writing this at old age. So as we came back, we brought in as prisoners the line of the enemy that we would run over in our forward movement. Okay, as the New Yorkers are retreating across the swell, Willard is apparently trying to rally them. And on this spot, ladies and gentlemen, at least according to the veterans, and this would have been open, and a lot of men would have been able to see this, a Confederate cannonball is going to come from the peach orchard, and Willard is mounted on horseback. And let me get the quote right. When the shell hit, quote, it carried away part of his face and head, and Willard, quote, fell from his horse instantly dead. The next senior colonel is Eliakim Sherrill. And Sherrill takes command, and you think Willard was inexperienced. Sherrill doesn't have anything. And he just saw his colleague ripped apart by a Confederate cannonball. So you can imagine his mindset. So let's go back to what I said earlier. Here's where they started from, over here. Here's where they've ended up. And Sherrill's sitting here and they're taking casualties, and what do? He has no orders. So Sherrill does the best thing he knows. His boss, Alexander Hayes, is 3/4 of a mile in that direction. That's who needs to tell him what to do, but he's not here physically. So Sherrill makes a decision. The Union soldiers have crossed into somewhere in here and they're standing at attention. He has those soldiers faced by the right flank, and he marches and starts marching them back to the very beginning of this tour, to where I showed you at the Bryan farm.
Thank you for watching our video. Please remember to like, share, leave a comment, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the channel.